What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? Technically it was the vice principal, but the day my brother died, apparently he thought it would be a good idea to walk in on story time. The teacher was reading to the class, set me on his lap and tell me in front of everyone that my brother committed suicide. When I was in 2nd grade, my mom died. When I was in 3rd grade, the evil witch of a teacher held me back from recess one day for something. While it was just us in the room, she asked if I went to church. I said no. She then told me that I was going to hell and would never see my mom again. I hated that bitch. So when I was in kindergarten I didn't make it to the bathroom in time and wet myself. Went to the nurse's office, got new clothes, but instead of panties I had to wear a pull-up. Not a big deal. I guess it was a school policy for kids my age, I don't really know. When I get back to my class my teacher loudly says, "Oh good, the baby is finally back," or something like that. She also knew about the policy and asked if I was wearing a diaper so every other student could hear. I was 5 and felt a ton of shame and humiliated. I started crying and trying to get out of school a lot because of it. My teacher often referred to me as a baby for the rest of the year. Also she would constantly ask if I needed to potty or if I was wearing a diaper, like I was a toddler or something. Got accused of plagiarism over a paper I wrote, and didn't plagiarize, that I was really excited about because of how well I thought I did on it. Enthusiasm fully destroyed. I had a similar experience where my lit professor brought me in to tell me my paper was flagged by the software for being plagiarized from over 180 other student papers from around the country. Not websites, not public articles, student papers from other schools. Longest chain of plagiarized words was 6. I laughed because I thought she was pointing out how ridiculously sensitive the software was. She was offended that I laughed at her. I asked her if she really believed that I tracked down almost 200 students to steal 3-word phrases from them and stitch them together into a paper, which would take 50x the effort that it actually took to write it. Not in those exact words. I really thought I wrote a great paper. Got an A, but I think it was because she felt dumb. Not exactly me, but had a teacher yell at one of my friends for not doing his homework and give him a Saturday school, even though his parents had died the night before. One time I was on my period and I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom multiple times. She refused to let me go. Eventually I stained my uniform and the chair. I was so embarrassed that I started crying. When my mother found out, she made the school fire that motherfucker. The girls in our elementary school were given proto-sex ed before the boys. The basic puberty stuff. Your body is starting to change. You might develop breasts, sweating, all that stuff. They made a hoo-hoo-hooch stupid deal about keeping it quiet. It's the girl's little secret. Don't go spreading it around school. It only occurs to me now that that is kinda dangerous in the wider scope of things. Anyway, my best friend was a boy and naturally, I skipped right off to tell him why suddenly half the class had an assembly all by themselves. My teacher heard about it, got me alone, grabbed me by both arms and shook me. "Keep your mouth shut." She was my favorite teacher up till then. Totally a great thing to teach a kid. My favorite teacher in middle school was arrested for child pornography. He wasn't my favorite after that. He also wasn't my teacher after that. I said that the dot over the I or J is called a tittle. She said it's not a tittle, it's a dot, and with that, she accused me of being impertinent. My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me. In previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground, but within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands. Who didn't like me? 4th grade kids, mostly, did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a beating that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new asshole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford Binet IQ test every year. My score dropped 10 points from 3rd to 4th grade, then rose 20 points in 5th grade when I had a nurturing teacher. If you are still alive, fuck you, Mrs. Erickson. We were discussing Jean Vanier and L'Arche. For context, Jean Vanier decided to invite 2 intellectually disabled men to live with him, and started setting up homes for them so they wouldn't be in asylums. The teacher looked right at me, I'm disabled, and said, oh yeah, Vanier created those homes so you people wouldn't be bothering people because the handicapped don't function in society. My friend I left just to talk it out. He got fired a few years later because he did not have his license up to date. Cherry on top, his wife was the vice principal. In the 8th grade I had a book report to do for 4 books all due on the same day. That was way too overwhelming to do at the time. I had some serious domestic violence going on at home between my parents. Spent all my time taking care of my younger brother, cleaning up the house, cooking, and crying from all the stress. It was worth 20% of my grade, and the day before it was due, I broke down and told my teacher everything, down to the time when my brother bled from his head from being hit by my dad, to the most recent attempted murder upon my mom. If I had even received a B, my dad would have beat the shit out of my mom for giving birth to a stupid kid. He called child services. My parents received the call and gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. They told him I lied just to get out of the assignment. The social worker told my teacher what my parents said and made the rest of my year a living hell. He treated me with such pettiness after that, and threatened to call my parents whenever I had either spoken too loud in class, or whenever I was unparticipative in gym. He called my parents for my bad behavior. Home life got significantly harder after that, and my parents told my entire family continuously how stupid I was for telling him. They laughed at me when I cried, or got upset about it. Years later, after repressing everything, I was diagnosed with severe PTSD from childhood trauma as a witness and victim of domestic violence, attempted murder thrice, and it took me 3 years in therapy to get over it. It was quick, but it was tough as it was during my university years, and I ended up having to take an extra year of school to catch up mentally. I was ready to speak up about my struggles again, when I couldn't function anymore as the traumatic flashbacks occurred twice a week 4 hours at a time. I couldn't do a single thing except tremble and live in fear. I was 18 by the time I was ready to reach out for help. Fuck you, Mr. Gentle, your name is creepy as fuck, and I really do wonder if being a petty 33-year-old to a 12-year-old child made your quality of life better. I hope that there's proper procedures put in place to protect children from such experiences. I was bullied really bad. Kids kept drawing awful ugly photos and leaving them on my desk with profanity towards my appearance. I had enough one day after dealing with a lot of abuse at home and the bullying at school, and when I saw another, broke down crying and brought it to my teacher. She just grabbed it, looked, and asked if I wanted it back. Did nothing to help, wouldn't listen to me about the constant bullying, and did absolutely nothing. I was in 7th grade and still remember it to this day. When I was in high school I got a lot of nosebleeds. Like a lot. So I got one in the middle of class, and I asked the teacher for a tissue. She said she didn't have any, so I asked to go to the toilet to get one, then she said no. Soon I asked again when blood was dripping from my hands, and she yelled at me for repeating myself, which is apparently bad. Soon a puddle of blood was on the table, then I got sent to isolation for disrupting the class. I was then suspended for acting inappropriate during class. She was then fired for putting my life at risk. I gotta say, when you get a nosebleed like that, you really see how much blood is inside of you. Teacher told me I was a liar to the whole class, as she didn't believe my grandmother was a World War II evacuee. She refused to believe me as she assumed my mum was younger than she looked at the time, and therefore my grandmother was younger as well. She thought my mum was in her late 20s when in reality she was in her early 40s at the time. Used to love math and science, until I had a teacher in 6th grade who would bully, mock, and do everything in his power to embarrass me in front of the entire class. I lost all love I had for school after that class. Fuck you, Mr. Bright.